Hello, thank you for coming in. This is the August webinar from an employment law HR perspective. I'm really disappointed to be giving this webinar, and the reason is this is a topic that is, or should, not is, that should belong in the 1970s and 1980s. But regretfully, it's as live today as it's possibly ever been. Discrimination, race discrimination. But the Equality Act was brought in 2010, and it was an act that looks at sex, age, religion, sexuality, etc., etc., on the forms of non-discrimination. Now, the Equality Act is a huge act. Believe me, we'll be sat here till midnight if I was to take you through the entire lot of it. Don't panic, I am not. But the bit we're focusing on today is the race aspect. Why is it timely? Well, regretfully, we've all seen the issues with the footballers at the Euro finals. We've all seen issues surrounding the Brexit. Racism has seen an influence in the workplace. And of course, thirdly, what we are seeing is just a general problem that's underlying in society. So we thought that, again, regretfully, but we are where we are, it's something that we're going to have a look on in today's webinar. So the Equality Act 2010, Section 9, race. Race includes obvious things: colour, black, white, okay. Nationality, ethnic or national origins. So it is basically anything that identifies somebody through their race. Okay, as you can see from this slide, race is very delicate in so much as that you can be Hindu, you can be Indian, and you will have a caste. And again, I'm sure I'm doing this rather clumsily, but you can be high caste, medium caste, or low caste. And does the discrimination work against that? Potentially, yes. As you, as HR professionals, you need to be constantly on your monitor to work out if it's something more subtle. Again, please keep your ears open for anybody that says, I'm being treated differently. It may not be as obvious on the first pass, but when you look into it, it could well be obvious. Discrimination is not always obvious. Of course, there's parts of it that are obvious. If you put a sign up in your window saying we're recruiting a waitress and we don't want any African people, any Asian people, then that's fairly obvious. That's direct discrimination. I'd like to think this stuff has died out, and I emphasise I'd like to think, but regretfully at Moorepay on the advice line, we do occasionally see it. So it's important that you take a very strong line on your policies and practices to make sure that everybody's treated equally. It's fairly obvious. The keys in the name of the Equality Act, i.e. equal, so no direct discrimination. But what I'd like to do is spend quite a bit of time on indirect discrimination. People out there saying, well, what do you mean? We do not inwardly indirect discriminate against our employees. And the answer is you may do, but it may be an unconscious bias. There's a famous case a few years ago now of a certain airline, I won't name, ran a recruitment advert for stewards or stewardesses. Not bothered, either one could apply to us, but they ran that advert in a ladies' magazine called Vogue, so a disproportionate amount of women would read that magazine than men would read that magazine. So although they weren't being overtly discriminatory, what they were doing is putting their advert for a job recruitment exercise in a place where disproportionately more women than men would see that. Well, I know what you're going to say. Well, it's not about sex discrimination today. Well, it's the same principle. If you ask your Christian priest to read out a vacancy, or you ask your Muslim imam, then the same thing's going to happen. You've got to make sure that not only when you're recruiting, but when you're employing, your message is consistent and available to all. So direct discrimination is being just that. I don't like you because of X. And indirect can be a lot more subtle. So you need to go have a look at your policies. You need to go have a look at how you communicate with your staff. how you communicate with your suppliers, and I'll come on to that in a short while, to make sure that you're being consistent and your information is available to everybody. Okay, let's move on to how we handle discrimination in the workplace and how we actually can discriminate in certain circumstances. Okay, so we've identified what types of discrimination are out there, but a tribunal will also look at what we've done with that discrimination. So you may have treated somebody, or hopefully you haven't, may have treated somebody less favourably on the grounds of their race or their perceived race. Doesn't actually have to be so. And the first one is fairly obvious. It's harassment, where you feel humiliated, offended, and degraded on the grounds of their race. Why it's important and why I'm mentioning this today, because it's an uncapped award at the tribunal. It doesn't matter if you're an SME with a turnover of 250 grand, or you are a major multiple with turnover of billions. A tribunal judge will not look at your means to pay. They will look at the offence. So if you like, it's not means tested. So if you've harassed your staff due to their race, that's the trigger for tribunal. They can still be in employment while taking you to tribunal. It's a popular myth that somebody has to leave your business to take your business to tribunal. It's not the case. So if you get a complaint of racial harassment, it's very important you take it very seriously, very quickly. Again, if you are clients of us, and hopefully the majority of these people listening are, call our advice line 24/7, 365. We offer, as you're no doubt aware, because your clients, indemnity insurance. So if we advise and it goes wrong, then it's your insurance that pays out at tribunal. If you're not clients of ours, clearly I'm biased, so I'm going to say become clients of ours. But if you're not clients of ours and have no intention to become clients of ours, the first slight whiff you get of harassment, race harassment, please take some professional advice quickly. It can be, I personally, I've seen businesses go under because of the tribunal award that can be tens, if not hundreds of thousands. Harassment will be the first crime, if you want to use a better phrase, labelled against you. The second word you'll see on that slide in front of you is victimization. People don't understand what the word victimization means. Your staff will say to you, I've done X, Y, and Z, and now I'm being victimized. Victimized becomes after the initial offence. Okay? So if somebody says I've been treated less favourably than my race, that's the harassment. Okay? If somebody says I am continually being treated worse by my race, I am being harassed and I have brought it to your attention. So this is why I'm saying that you need to get on any claims of racial harassment or indeed any other harassment quickly, because it escalates rather quickly. So a simple case of racial harassment, a name calling, somebody not getting promotion, somebody not passing the probation, and it's not happened because I'm black, white, Asian, Jewish, whatever, then it quickly escalates into victimization. So it gets very serious very quickly. Okay, clearly, the slides in front of you. How do we handle discrimination in the workplace? I've mentioned in the previous slides, we can identify it, and with due respect, that's the easiest bit to do. Somebody says, and a manager says to you, I have a problem. Somebody's claiming that they didn't get promotion because they were Polish or whatever it may be. And before we move on, I just want to point out to the nerds, and I include myself very firmly in that frame, your company is liable for race claims, but also your managers are individually liable for any discrimination that they've done. So if your manager is racist, then yes, of course, the business is liable. We all know about that. But also your manager can be personally be liable to the tune of £5,000 for being racist in the workplace. And for ultra nerds, that comes under Section 109 and Section 110 of the Equality Act. So as a business, you've got responsibility. but your managers have responsibility. Okay, let's look at how to handle discrimination in the workplace. Okay, I'm going to do something a little bit counterintuitive. You can, in very certain circumstances, be racially discriminatory. I'm not going to read through that slide. That's for you to do in your own time. But if you have a certain situation where you absolutely have to have somebody with a certain racial profile in a job, it can be lawful. If you just think about discrimination, I'm going to widen it out, not just to race discrimination. If you put on a production of the musical Annie, and Annie is played by a 49-year-old 6'3" male, you're going to struggle for a little bit. There is certain circumstances where it's a genuine occupational requirement for somebody to look a certain way. It can be done, but it's fair to say these circumstances are very, very, very much in the minority. As of 99.9% of the time, you should be employing people on their ability to do their job and not on anything that could be considered racial. But in certain circumstances, it could be the case. But again, don't take a risk. If you're clients of ours, give us a call. If you're not clients of ours and you wish to make a certain decision based on race, then what I would suggest you do is take some professional advice rather quickly, because it can be very, very costly. I'll come on to the cost shortly, but again, I'm not wishing to put the fear in you, but tribunals, quite rightly, take racial discrimination very, very seriously. If there's one takeaway from this slide, from this presentation, this is this slide. First of all, approach the issue with an open, objective mind. Gain a deep understanding of the complaint and/or issue. It is no excuse to say, I was too busy, I was with an important customer. You guys listening as HR professionals or SME owners, there is never, ever an excuse to say, somebody claimed that they were being racially discriminated against and I put it 6 on my list thing to do. No, it goes number 1. Number 2, could issue complaint be considered race discrimination? We need to work out what it is. Is it direct discrimination? Have they been denied a promotion? Have they been denied gaining a certain contract because of their race? Is it subtle than that? Is it indirect? Is it because they typically go to church on Sunday? White people, again, indirect discrimination, are more proportionally Christian than, say, Asian people who are more proportionally Muslim. So again, you need to look into the background. I know what you're going to say, kind of white people, Asian people, you, Carl, are being hoisted by your own petard. We're not. We're looking behind the initial complaint. Is there anything there that leads them that indirectly they could have been discriminated against? Likewise, we need to find out what harassment is, and likewise, we need to find out what the victimization is. Number 3, investigate and gather evidence. Clearly, that's obvious. You're doing that for 2 reasons. The first reason you're doing it is because it's the right thing to do. If somebody's complaining that they're being racially harassed, then you need to investigate and investigate thoroughly. That's the first and most obvious reason. There is a secondary reason, and that's because you're doing it for the judge. In the event things go south, in the event that you end up in tribunal, work on the principle, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So if you are in a nasty tribunal race case, what you need to be doing is putting before the judge your thorough investigation notes, your interview notes, your statement notes. It's the right thing to do, of course, but also it's evidence for a potential law case, and that's the last thing you want. Okay, likewise with number 4, there's 2 reasons for doing this. Take the appropriate action, disciplinary, including dismissal or whatever. Yep, that's the right thing to do. Morally, it's the right thing, but again, I'm coming back to the same point. If you're taken to tribunal, if you find out that one of your managers has been discriminatory, if you've not taken strong action against that point, then the judge may work out the principle that you've been involved. You know you have a racist manager. and quote unquote, you've done nothing about it. What does that tell me about your business? So again, you're doing it because it's the right reason. You've got to give natural justice, but also in the event of litigation, you need to evidence the point that you've taken it seriously and you've dealt with it at the appropriate level. And point 5, just before we move on, point 5, don't get overexcited. Somebody says, I've been racially discriminated against. That's one of the easiest things in the world to say. It needs an objective, sound, logical look at it. Be rational, consider the evidence. If you automatically assume, or you go from the standpoint of they have been racially discriminated against, then that's a dangerous point. Start with a balanced view, start with an open mind, and see where that takes you. Okay, a lot of people, we've seen from the England footballers' tweets that have been racially discriminated, a lot of your staff assume that their behaviour is none of your concern at the office door or the factory gate. It is not. If your staff are dealing with racism outside of work, it is very much your responsibility. There's been a lot of high-profile cases recently. I'm not going to read through the slide again. I've given you that pain once. I won't do it again. But there's been a lot of things in the press about people that have been racist on Twitter, Instagram, to footballers. There was a Danny Baker thing. There's always some celebrity that gets racially abused if they say or do something after the Olympics. It will affect your brand. If you've got an employee that is being racist on Twitter, on Facebook, or whichever social media is there like, and they can be identified to you, you have very much a legal obligation to do something about it. So if your jurisdiction thinks that it stops at the office door, it does not. If you've got staff that are tweeting or sending anything offensive, even in their own time, and you can be identified back with it, again, that may well be gross misconduct. So I'm not suggesting you stalk your employees, not for a second. What I am suggesting is you keep your radar open that if any of your staff, any of your managers, any of your suppliers are pushing anything out there that could be deemed as racist, then you deal with it immediately. Likewise, if your clients are ours, then give us a call. That's more than important. Okay, so responsibility. Gone are the old days where once somebody left the factory, it wasn't your problem. It is now. So please, I'm not suggesting you witch hunt, but please keep a little eye on what happens and what the impacts could be on your company, your brand, and your standing in society. When to take action. If you've found a racist social media post or something like that, first thing to do is screenshot it. The second an employee knows that you've observed something racist, they will delete. So first thing to do is screenshot it. And the second thing is get ready for the defense, and we hear it all the time, my account has been hacked. Well, who would do that? Why would they do that? It makes no sense. Come and tell me more about it. But some key points to have a look at this slide is, does the employee's profile identify them as working for the employer? A lot of people listening today, I'm aware, will be on Facebook and things like that. And one of the first questions it asks is, who do you work for? So if I, and I never would, by the way, but if I, in my Facebook profile or my other media profile, put Cal Hardcastle Moorepay and then say something racist, there is a clear link back to me. There's a clear link back to Moorepay. And believe me, Moorepay would take a very firm stance on that, and I'd suggest you do the same. So if somebody put something, I'll be polite and call it insensitive, is there a route back to your business? Have they identified themselves either via their name, or are they wearing a company shirt on one of their photographs on the profile, or have they named you as an employer? We need to take action, because all of a sudden, that's your many years of hard work building up your business potentially gone in a heartbeat. Okay, the second thing that we need to look at is, what is the actual harm? If somebody's put something mildly offensive and you've got to go digging for a long while to find out that they're connected to your business, then is there really any harm? Again, it's a case-by-case basis, but I'll leave that with you. And likewise, the people that have seen the post. If you've got a racial abusive post, but that's seen by 5 million people, then it's almost certainly gross misconduct. So you've just got to weigh up where the damage is and what's the strength of the damage. And again, I've said this before, and I will say it again to labour a point. You've got to do it because it's the right thing to do, but also you've got to do it because you're building your case for tribunal. Hopefully you'll never get there, but you need to justify to a judge why somebody saying something was not just, and I'll come on to the banter defence, and by the way, the banter defence always fails, but why it wasn't just quote-unquote banter, but why it has genuine damage to your business. Finally, on this slide, just before we move on, you've got to have a clear policy in place. Certain things like direct racism, then technically you do, but you can justify to a judge why you wouldn't have a hardline racist working for you. But you need to have a social media policy. You need to point out to your staff what they should and should not be tweeting, within certain limits, of course. And likewise, if you're a client of ours and using your handbook, there will be a heavy section in your policies, in your handbook, about social media. It's a vitally important thing to do. A lot of people are really nice inside work, but once 5 o'clock Friday comes and they've had a few cans of beer, they turn into rather different people. So it's important that you look at them in work, but keep them on the radar to make sure they're not doing anything they shouldn't be doing outside of work. Okay, right. So we've identified what racism looks like. I appreciate it's been a little bit of a whistle stop this morning, but again, the slides are there for review. We've identified types of discrimination. We've identified that there's indirect, which is the more subtle of discrimination. We've identified of how to deal with it, and we've talked about disciplinary action, and we've talked about natural justice of gross misconduct, and we've also talked about need to build your case for a tribunal. But the consequences for getting it wrong, I promise you, are not worth thinking about. So we'll whiz over this slide, but I do need to point it out. Recently, there's been an award for £1 million. The case is there if you want to look it up. So an employer has been fined £1 million by a tribunal judge. I appreciate in that case it's an NHS trust, so they've possibly got access to serious funds. But I'll just reiterate what I said at the top of this webinar. It doesn't come down to on your ability to pay it. So if you say, well, I run a small shop, my turnover's £100,000 and I've one member of staff, it doesn't matter. The award is absolute. Second point, the other consequence is adverse publicity. Do you really want your name in the headlines of the local paper, splashed all over Facebook and the new media, explaining that you've been lost in court because you're racist? Okay. And the third point is, and before I come on to the third point, let me just nip back to the overall point, is you will have tribunal costs. Lawyers are not cheap to run. You'll have the award and you'll have your own costs. Even if you lose and you've acted reasonably, you will have your own costs. It's not like what you see on television where the other side pays the costs. In tribunal, you pay your own costs. So even if you've been potentially discriminatory, you go to tribunal and win, you will still be paying your own legal fees. And that can be, believe me, quite expensive, as I'm sure you'll agree. Okay, the third point, and this is possibly the most popular point. If you have behaviours, if you have members of your staff that could, emphasise the word could, be discriminatory, you will spend all of your time on grievances, litigation, absenteeism, unhappy workforce, etc., etc., etc. If your policies are fair and equal to everybody, then don't get me wrong, yes, staff will fall out with each other, staff will fall out with you, that's just life, but it'll be kept to a minimum. So the consequence is quite serious. From £1 million tribunal payout, bear in mind £1 million is not the highest I've seen. That's just the recent one. There was one a good few years ago that was 4.4 million. So you really don't want to be going there. So yeah, extreme circumstances, millions of pounds paid out. Local circumstances where you're spending a lot of your time dealing with hassle you don't need to do. There's been a lot of bad feeling around Brexit, a lot of bad feeling about foreign nationals. Just stamp it out immediately, get on it immediately and nip it in the bud. Okay, there's nothing on this slide that's going to give you any surprises, but let me just chat through it. First of all, take reasonable steps to ensure discrimination does not occur. Fairly obvious, but again, you need to evidence it. Again, robust policies on the second point. What have you got for your reporting procedures if anybody's claiming racism? Encourage the grievance at the first opportunity. Likewise, all of your policies and procedures do not indirectly discriminate. We've seen this quite a little bit at the moment. I'm sure listeners have got some staff that are from Europe that are applying for settled status. We're seeing a lot of people saying, hang on a minute, you've asked me repeatedly for my settled status. You wouldn't ask a UK national that. You're harassing me, and you're harassing me because I'm Polish, because a UK national could not have European settled status. So just make sure that your policies, I'm sure, are not directly discriminatory, but even if they're indirectly discriminatory, if you're pestering your settled status people for evidence, at some point that becomes you carrying out a statutory duty, which is the correct thing to do. But another point is you may be picking on your Portuguese, Spanish, German, Polish nationals. Which one is it? And again, indirect discrimination is far subtle and not easy to spot. Likewise, regular equality and diversity training for all staff members. There's two reasons you're doing that. The first reason, and I know I sound like a stuck record, and some people out there may remember what a stuck record sound like, and I'm again showing my age. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You need to be promoting equality, you need to be promoting diversity of staff. As a business, you need the best out of all of your staff, irrespective of their race. But the second reason you're doing is in the event that you are found to be racially discriminatory in tribunal, a judge will have a look at what is your equality and diversity training like. They are now allowed to actually look into your business and try and work out if you have a policy, training and procedures that will define you as a business. Okay, so just being silent on it may mean that you condone racism. Quite an extreme, but believe me, I've seen it happen. Okay, the other point I'm coming down to now is the banter. The banter defence will always, always, always fail in tribunal. Somebody's banter is somebody else's discrimination. So just make sure that when people say it was just a bit of banter, that you actually take it seriously and look at the language used and look at the intent used. Just saying I was trying to pull his leg will, if excuse the pun about pulling legs, will not stand up in tribunal. Okay, the penultimate point there is deal with complaints regarding discrimination. Do not allow it to fester. If you've got a slight problem, get on it immediately. Don't let it to, well, it'll be all right. I'll put it off well next week. Well, I sort out X, Y, and Z. You need to deal with it immediately. You've seen the reasons why you need to deal with it immediately. It can be potentially certainly business damaging, even business ending for your business. And the final point, clearly for our clients, seek professional advice and guidance at all times from us. I will say it again, please be a client of ours if you're not a client of ours. But if you're not a client of ours and you have something that's potentially very nasty, get some professional legal advice as quick as possible.